What's going on here, Vaughn? I mean, I know you've been following this closely, but do we have a sense of whether Team Trump ever expects to get this paperwork signed?
This is paperwork that is normally signed months before, and yet we are now 3 weeks after the election, and every single week I have asked the transition, hey, is there any update? Are you guys not going to sign the paperwork? Because not only are we talking background checks, we're also talking about the Trump transition having to turn over financial disclosures, reveal its donors, as well as other potential conflicts of interest. And yet every single time I have been told that they're still in discussions about signing this memorandum of understanding, which would effectively begin these FBI background checks. That is the answer 3 weeks on that we continue to get. I just want to underscore, it's not just the top cabinet posts that you're talking about. There's more than 4,000 political appointees that Donald Trump will be able to nominate and put forward through this, through some of them confirmation proceedings, other them don't need to be Senate affirmed. So this, I think, is a real question mark of whether Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard will ever get these FBI background checks, or is there the potential that he will install his own FBI director at some point, remove Chris Wray, and that a lot of these thousands of other appointees will never even go through this process themselves.
So some curious, very serious questions you're raising. Ken, what is the broad concern if, say, private investigators end up doing these checks instead of the FBI, which is, as we pointed out, something we've seen for 7 decades?
Yeah, Chris, private investigators can do a thorough background check on someone, but they don't have access to the same kind of information that the FBI does, particularly if we're talking about national security issues. So, if, for example, if there was a counterintelligence investigation related to Tulsi Gabbard's trip to meet with Syrian dictator Assad, only the FBI would have access to that. Private investigators wouldn't. You know, in the case of Matt Gaetz, the FBI would have had access to the criminal investigation file where he wasn't prosecuted. No one else would be able to see that. So the FBI has the ability to get information that no one else can, and it also has a level of credibility. But of course, the Trump folks do not trust this FBI. They've made very clear that that's the case, and so they may be reluctant to use the FBI for these background checks.
Ken, thank you for that. Okay, Sahil, I want to play what Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford, who is a member of the Intelligence Committee, had to say about Tulsi Gabbard.
Does anything about her concern you?
Well, we'll have lots of questions. She met with Bashir Assad. We'll want to know what the purpose was and what the direction for that was. As a member of Congress, we'll want to get a chance to talk about past comments that she's made and get them into full context. So, sure, there's comments that are floating out there, but we want to be able to know the rest of the story.
We want to be able to know. Interesting sentence there. So, Sahil, what is the level of concern you are hearing from lawmakers, specifically Republicans, that there is information out there they may not know that maybe can't be uncovered without an FBI investigation?
Yeah, there is some real concern, Chris. I think an FBI background check would ease at least some of the anxieties that senators have toward this very unconventional pick, Tulsi Gabbard, for DNI, in part because of her her warm views toward Russia. Remember, a lot of senators are still Russia hawks. The Senate is still not as magnified in Trump's image as the House Republican conference is, and a background check could potentially get that information that, you know, they wonder may be out there. There's not anything specific that they're looking for here. I think it's more of a peace of mind sort of thing. The situation, her trip with Assad in Syria is also a question. The issue here is that the DNI oversees intel briefings for the president. So some, you know, our NBC News colleagues have reported concerns within the intel community, people who are close to senators, that she could potentially filter information to Trump through a pro-Russia lens. Also, Chris, an FBI background check protects them politically. Remember, these senators are politicians who have to answer to a constituency. If there is something there, and they don't know that there is, if there is something there, they would much rather know before they cast a vote, you know, to make sure something potentially bad doesn't happen for a nominee that they ultimately supported to this very powerful position.
Yeah, if something blows up, you don't want to be the person who voted for. Okay, David, a lot's been written, right, about why Trump chose people that he knew had obvious personal and political baggage. Some say, well, you know, he feels sort of a kindred spirit with people who have been accused of things they say they didn't do. Maybe it's because, as Axios says, he wants people who are the Roy Cohn types, you know, the attorney general he always wished he could have, who can kind of do the so-called political dirty work. Why do you think? Do you think he felt emboldened by the results, or he figured he's just going to fight it through. Why put yourself in this position?
Yeah, look, I think all of the above. Let's step back for a minute. This transition is so much more prepared and ready to go than the transition 8 years ago when they scrapped the work they had done because of internal disagreements, started over, and the new president at the time, who had never been president, is busy trying to place people in positions that he doesn't know, may not align with in terms of his agenda. And a lot of those people ended up being fired or let go because of inadequate background checks, things they weren't aware of. So this time around, it is a much smoother operation. And yet, I think the easiest way to understand Trump is to have watched his campaign, right? Why did he first nominate Gates and now Pam Bondi for Attorney General? Because he wants people that are going to be more attuned to what he wants and not be willing to play the independent role that some people like to think of as the Attorney General. He wants people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard who look at national security and other issues the way he does that reflect the coalition that elected him. Now, as for the mandate, all presidents do this. They win, and they imagine in their head that people voted for them for every last single thing they ever said from the day they started running to the day they won. I think this mandate exists for two things, if it exists for anything, which is get inflation under control, make people feel like they've got more money in their pocket, and make people feel safer by getting the border under control and getting their communities under control. Beyond that, I think what the new president will find out after he takes office is that some of the things people will be fine with as long as it doesn't interfere in their daily life, and other things they will push back on, and he'll have to learn just like everybody else does.
So, Sahil, what are lawmakers saying about the chances for some other candidates? I mean, obviously, Tulsi Gabbard being one we've just talked about, but Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr.
Yeah, Chris, I would start by saying the Matt Gaetz for AG rejection sort of stands on its own. This was in a category of a nomination that many senators, both Democrat and Republican, viewed as preposterous on its face, not just for the ethics allegations, but many of them didn't see Matt Gaetz as minimally qualified for the position. I don't know for sure that any of the other nominees rise to that level, at least not quite the level of Matt Gaetz, but that doesn't mean they're all going to get confirmed easily. There are still real questions and real issues that some members have with several of the nominees. Pete Hegseth is one of them. There are sexual misconduct allegations, which his lawyer has called baseless. There's some senators say do a background check. Bill Hagerty, as you pointed out, said Americans don't care about a background check. Trump won on change and disruption. There's RFK for HHS. The Republican concern about this is interesting. They don't like the fact that he's been supportive of abortion rights. That may be his biggest problem with the GOP senators who would have to ultimately vote on his nomination. And of course, Democrats have plenty of concerns about his anti-vaccine rhetoric. Nevertheless, one senator closely aligned with Donald Trump, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, says he believes the votes are there to confirm RFK. Take a listen to what he said.
I've done my unofficial whip count with both Republicans and Democrats. The conversation almost always starts with, boy, there's a lot that I just love that Bobby Kennedy's talking about and pushing, the chronic illness and better nutrition. But I have these concerns. Based on the list of concerns, knowing Bobby, I think he'll be able to, answer those concerns, and I think he'll be able to be confirmed quite easily.
Now, the standard caveat here, Chris, Ron Johnson is not the whip. He's from the MAGA wing of the party that was always expected to confirm the vast bulk, if not all, of Trump's nominees. And finally, there is Pam Bondi, the replacement nominee for AG, who has gotten some concerns about the fact that she was a registered foreign lobbyist for the government of Qatar. There was also some talk about, the so-called retribution agenda that Donald Trump ran on. James Langford was on the Sunday shows talking about how he wants to hear from her that she recognizes she is not Donald Trump's lawyer, as she literally has been in the past, but that in this position, she would be America's lawyer.